6 people who have ruined our relationship with money. Greetings from our show. Although money plays a vital role in our lives, we don't always have an easy relationship with it. Have you ever wondered why we sometimes find it difficult to manage our finances? Important people in our daily lives and throughout history have influenced many of our financial views and behaviors. These people have influenced our attitudes toward and management of money, whether they realize it or not. We're going to highlight 6 individuals in this episode that have had a big influence on our relationship with money, sometimes in a negative way. We'll discuss how their deeds and ideas have shaped our attitudes and behaviors around money, as well as how we might identify and alter these tendencies for a more secure financial future. Remember to like and give us a thumbs up so we can continue regularly uploading videos. Number 6. The father of my kids was embezzling all of our cash. He decided that he should receive all of our money while I was on maternity leave, and I foolishly consented to this at the time. He would whine about not being able to afford anything for the kids or me, and he would spend everything on booze. He wouldn't buy anything festive for our first Christmas together with our first child. Therefore, he forced me to construct a cardboard box Christmas tree that would stand in the room's corner. I cut the box into a tree shape and colored it with ornaments. When his best friend, whom he had known since elementary school, came to visit for a few days, we went for a walk. Autumn had come and the rain had begun. I was missing my coat and shoes, so I was wearing sandals, trousers, and a pullover. When his friend questioned me about why I wasn't wearing my coat and appropriate shoes, I told him I didn't have any. When asked why not, my ex said he couldn't afford it, even though all our money was in his accounts. He later discussed it with my ex, and I overheard him tell him that he couldn't afford it because he needed beer to unwind after the stress of becoming a new father. Later that day, when his friend had gone back up country, he called to tell me he had found money under one of my flower pots to buy a coat and some shoes for himself and the baby. He warned me not to tell my ex though, or else he might wind up using the money for booze. He was acting like a true angel. I wish I could say it was my wake-up call, and that I left soon after, but I didn't. By the time I left that relationship, financial mistreatment and other forms of abuse had left me bankrupt, and it took me years to rebuild my life. Number 5. Although it wasn't the primary problem, money certainly made things difficult. He lost his job, and we began dating at the start of the pandemic. I was unaware of his financial recklessness until he expressed a desire to move out of his mother's house. He continued to gripe about how pricey everything was, saying that he didn't want to wait the 6 months until his birthday, when everything would have been less expensive and he would have had more time at his new job. He asked me for a deposit, which I declined, and then he purchased a TV and computer. About a month later, he lost his new job and was living off of savings. He was always purchasing unnecessary items such as virtual reality headsets, but heaven forbid he shelled out $12 for a battery pack or $6 to fix his malfunctioning charging wire. I was always the one to pay for our dates and store trips. You can't get soaked for that. It was like taking care of an irresponsible teenager. When he took me on a date, where I bought us dinner, and he paid for the activity, I experienced a profound shift in my feelings. Contrary to the rest of the relationship, I began to dread doing anything involving money because I knew he would complain about how much it costs or guilt me for not working but always having drugs. It felt like a mutual relationship. The whole thing was very one-sided on my part, but I was in my dumb bitch phase. Number 4. A sister, not a partner. She persuaded my mother to give her a sizable portion of my father's 401k funds. That money would have allowed my parents, who were not wealthy at all, to have better food and health care. My sister's husband, who comes from an extremely rich family, needed money to repay the loan his parents gave them so they could purchase a home. They agreed to repay the money as stated in a promissory note, but they stopped after 3 installments and never sent another dollar back. My dad left everything to me and my daughter, and he excluded her from his will. After nearly 10 years of not speaking, she gave me a call in December 2009. Why did you make that call? She came to me to ask for money so she could continue to live in her home. I hung up the phone without saying anything. Number 3. $400,000 was left to me. This implied to my then-boyfriend that he expected me to cover all expenses. He left his job to follow his passions, which included doing nothing but sitting on his ass while I continued to work and was my only source of income. He was also quite ungrateful, thinking that I would cook and clean after work while he stayed in and did nothing. I was fully utilized. I felt that one of the things I admired most about him was his generosity, and that our perspectives on money were similar. He obviously never complained when I made more money than him in the first 5 years. His salary eventually increased to the point where it exceeded mine. And that's when things went south. Even before COVID struck, I was feeling down, sad, and in a terrible place. Since I enjoy socializing, working from home alone was challenging for me, particularly when my husband would come home and insist that since I was spending the entire day at home, the house should at least be cleaned and dinner ready. I still earned a good sum of money with my own business throughout the first 2 years. He first claimed that since he was making more money, he could afford to buy frivolous items, and he later used this as an excuse to accuse me of supporting me. On his way to work, he purposefully created noise, turned on lights, and otherwise made my mornings awful so that he could give me lectures about how I should perform my job, how little worth I have, how he must work 3 times as much as I do, and how we should change our way of life. All I wanted was for him to leave the house, so I learned to just sit through hours and hours of a broken record and cry about it later. After I moved into an office, he stopped assessing how much and how often I worked. However, he continued to remark that I was wasting his money by renting the space, and that I wasn't making any more money. After 3 years, I realized that it wasn't a lack of ability or willingness on my part, but rather a gradual erosion of my self-worth and value, reducing me to a mere puddle each day. I sobbed uncontrollably and pleaded, "I wish I had my old job so you would leave me alone. He wasn't necessary for me." Number 2. My father unexpectedly passed away. He and his sisters visited my parents to comfort my sister, my mom, and me. My dad left everything to my mom, so when I overheard them discussing how much money they would receive from his will, I became enraged. To top it all off, my cousin, who happens to be my dad's goddaughter, won concert tickets to see a boy band from the 90s that she had seen multiple times. She is one of those people who will travel to see the band, so she missed his wake and funeral. My sister and I haven't spoken to our aunts in nearly 2 years. Number 1. My abusive ex was terrible with money. He got into a mountain of debt upgrading his car. We lived in a property my parents owned, and they decided to do him a solid and give him a break on rent so he could get his debt under control. Not only did he not put the money towards his debt, but he also kept racking up more, refused to move out when we broke up, and threatened to sue so he could get anything he had out in the house, like the new fridge. I made a fraction what he did and ended up paying for all the bills and food. It was a nightmare. Fast forward to when I met my now husband. He was on unemployment insurance after getting laid off from his last job. We took turns paying for dates, he never defaulted on bills, and didn't have a mountain of debt. It was such a relief, I regularly broke down in tears over it. I appreciate you looking. Remember to subscribe and like our YouTube channel.